Mayor Jacobs?
I am here.
Committeeman Hickey?
Here.
Ms. Orabana? Here. Mr. Leonard?
Here.
Mr. DiGiovanni?
Here.
Mr. Walter?
Here.
Ms. Christie?
Here.
Chairwoman Gutschall?
Here.
Adequate notice of this meeting of the Bedminster Township Land Use Board was filed with the Township Clerk, sent to the Bernardsville News and the Courier News, and to all subscribers, and posted at the Township Municipal Building, 1 Miller Lane, Bedminster, New Jersey, on January 6, 2023.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll open it up to the public. Anybody? I certainly don't see anybody. On voting machines.
There is no one logged on by Zoom either.
Okay.
No public.
So we'll close the public session. And we have minutes that need to be approved from May 4th.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I will recuse myself. Anyone opposed? Okay, and we have minutes, I guess, executive minutes as well.
I'll make the motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? I recuse myself.
Do we have an exec for tonight?
Unless you want one, I didn't need you. Glad to talk about anything, but I don't need you.
Some of
I think we're going right into our,
Sorry.
we're going right into our master plan discussion. And who's going to be the lucky person? Tom, Mayor?
So, as we went through the rezoning for the KRE property and also for the AT&T property, and I've had discussions with Paul, and with Frank about the FAR in our commercial districts and the rest of the OR zones. And at the same time, we've had certain discussions with property owners about potential uses. I think everyone's familiar with the repetitive requests for residential in properties that are currently zoned ORV. And just for a reminder, ORV is the office research zone. The V stands for village. I was going to hope someone would say Victor.
That's too.
Yeah. So it's considered a transitional zone as you go from the traditional office research zone, and to some extent, the current zoning for ORV is a remnant from the 80s, maybe even early 90s. Big lawns, straight office research, no amenity spaces or no amenitized accessory spaces. And it just seemed that it's not appropriate. And Paul had told me a couple weeks ago, this was actually following a discussion with one of the property owners where once again they were pushing for residential. And I said, look, I've been thinking about this zone, and I think the FAR is way too tight, but there's no chance that it would be considered for residential. But we can certainly work around the FAR and to some extent providing additional amenities on this property. And there are two significant properties in Bedminster that are fit within the ORV. One is the Advanced Office property on Route 206, and the other is the Crossroads Office Park down on Crossroads, or also known as Pluckerman Way. So both properties have a little bit of vacancy issues, need a little TLC, and need some support for some of the office buildings. We heard back from one of the property owners just really 2 weeks ago, saying that there was an opportunity to bring in a headquarters for a New Jersey-based company that is looking to relocate, and is looking for around 30,000 square feet of a new building that would be custom built for them. And it seemed like, okay, if, since I was already talking about adjusting certain elements in the ORV zone, well, maybe this is an opportune time. We met with the prospective user. We met with the CEO and some others from, actually it was the CEO and some of the others from this company. And it's a well-known company, and this would be a nice feather in Bedminster's hat, so to speak, to get them to relocate their headquarters here. And in one sense, it would be great to get them in, but on a larger sense, it's adjusting the ORV no matter what. They have some certain time constraints with getting out of their existing headquarters space and being able to locate into a new one that would have to get site plan approval and be constructed to line up with leaving their existing space. So even though that Paul and Frank and I have had discussions about adjusting the ORV to begin with, this seems like, oh, okay, now we've got a little bit of timing issues here. And so after the meeting, I said, well, let's look at our schedule and let's see what we need to do to adjust the master plan, and then have the Township Committee introduce an ordinance consistent with an adjusted master plan for the ORV. And we looked at the schedule and said, okay, if we we discussed this in concept at our June 1 meeting, and we can have a second discussion at our next June meeting, and be prepared to have a public hearing on the master plan amendment at the end of June, so it'd be a special meeting. That would give the Township Committee the opportunity to draft an ordinance with Paul and Frank's input, and then present it back to the Land Use Board in July in position at the Township Committee, if everything goes and there's endorsement and the TC is on board and the master plan is revised and the proposed ordinance is deemed not inconsistent with the master plan, that there's a chance that we could actually have this, these revisions to the ORV in place by the end of July, which would then allow this one headquarters space to then make their application and proceed. And the elements that we were looking at for adjusting the ORV is an increase to the floor area ratio to accommodate additional commercial development consistent with what we see in other towns. And Paul was one who gave me the number, and his suggested number was 0.25 FAR. And the other element is something that we frankly put into the ORDL ordinance, which is providing for some degree of retail into these properties as well. The advanced property on 206, across from where AT&T is moving in, transitional to the Bedminster Village. The Pluckman Crossroads property across from the new soon-to-be KRE site, and also transitional to Pluckman Village, where there's some retail, sort of hidden retail, but perhaps it's another opportunity to bring some food vendors or something else, some what we call amenity or accessory uses to support the office that's already there, and to some to some basis also to attract tenants from located. Certainly, as we've seen businesses leaving, I'm going to just point to Bridgewater for a bit, Santa Fe and some other tenants leaving Bridgewater to go to Morristown because of amenities being located on site and proximate to some other activation. So to me, the adjustments that we're going to discuss, excuse me, are consistent and modernize our ORV, which has essentially been the same for 80s or the 90s. Is that when the ORV came around? So it's time to, take a hard look and look. Hey, Colin and I did this just last week with Frank, and we walked around Pluckman and we walked down Crossroads and Pluckman Way. There's not a lot of cars in those buildings. And if you drive past the Advanced property, there's not a lot of cars there, but it's interesting that a new business wants to locate there and build new stuff with some new architecture. And it's a way of putting a shine on Bedminster, and it's a type of user and headquarter space, and if the architecture stays consistent with what was presented to us, I think it improves the entire campus and to some extent the same amenities which would support the Advanced property, whatever element of retail Paul and Frank recommend, would also support the AT&T property as well as something that Carol mentioned, other than Little Pickles and maybe Annie's Deli, there's really no place to get food. And we heard that from Lou as well, right?
Yeah.
There's only so many times you can go to Bedminster Pizza.
All the time. I think we're losing our services for the people that we need to supply to. I brought this up to the mayor the other day, that the contractors come into the hills, the landscapers, the snow plowers, and all the trade people are coming in because they're getting older, and they have no place to eat now. They ate at McDonald's, they ate at Burger King, they were packed at Burger King lunch line, and Subway. We've lost all that, so we haven't supplied that back into the community. And what about our affordable housing? You're not eating at Pluckman for lunch. I mean, they want, food as well. So I think it's really important that we.
I'm trying to get Jersey Mike's to come to
I
Bedminster
know
for like
you
3
have.
years.
I know.
By the way, Jersey Mike's was one of the companies that was
They do.
identified as a prospect.
Oh, yeah, and
They do.
they are expanding like crazy. I've opened 30 this year already.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Well, I know they were looking at the Subway site, but there was a reason why they, I'm waiting. There are other places they can go in Bedminster if possible.
Yeah, we need to competition.
What do you envision for a Crossroads that's a little bit different?
So Crossroads is interesting because you have Crossroads 1 and 2, and then you have 1 Pluckman Way, right? So and then it just doesn't seem to flow. And one of the reason that Frank, Colin, and I, and maybe 12 other people, primarily owners of properties in Pluckman, were walking up and down Route 202, 206 there and going into the Somerset Village Shopping Center and going down by the KRE and Annie's Deli and coming back around, was to look at the streetscape. What works, and more importantly, what doesn't work, and taking a couple riffs that I've heard from this board, from Rich, Anna, and I think Lou as well, talking about our neighborhoods. And I remember Rich talking about the time is, you look at the trees and bushes that are, excuse me, that are there today, and it's probably this very board imposed those trees, on those businesses and property owners way back when, but now they're blocking the buildings, right? They're blocking buildings, the signage is inadequate back there. You don't even know who's in these places. And we've got some really good property owners who are looking to do stuff, both on architecture and improving the streetscape, and they all have to work together. And so that's the reason that we were out there. So we were looking at it from a streetscape perspective, but then we walked through Crossroads and Pluckman Way, and like, wow, how would you integrate some retail there? Either you sacrifice some of the parking, and there seems to be a whole lot of parking out there that
So Crossroads be willing to just, that's up to them. But
no, it's up to them. So this is right. This is not a site plan application. This is tweaking the master plan, saying our long-term vision is not just office, but allowing some degree of retail in support, or to bring some vitality down into those areas.
It'll really enhance walkability, right? We're going to all of a sudden have a couple of hundred units worth of people in or around Pluckerman, most of them coming from the new development with money in their pocket. They're going to get out of their unit, and unless they need to go someplace in their car, they're going to walk someplace if there's any place to walk. So if you think of where Crossroads is, some retrofitting there aren't too many opportunities for us to add retail. One of the saddest things about the Hills, and I mean, about the way the Hills is configured, is that shopping center is a vehicle accessible element. We're not even talking about trying to get sidewalks in our discussions across to the village center from the middle of town, because nobody's going to walk all the way down to that traffic light to walk across the highway, 5 lanes of highway, to get up into the shopping center that has no sidewalks to get you anyplace. So what we're really trying to do is create that nucleus in the center of Pluckerman, in the more historic area and in Crossroads, that will supplement restaurants and these other businesses that'll make more people get in town and walk. People from the Hills will definitely drive down to town and walk around once they get there if we give them a reason to.
But this new ORV zone, if it was Crossroads, could they just remove those buildings and just put retail?
We're gonna limit the amount of total floor area out of the site that you're working on that can be retail to a relatively small share.
No. And by the way, this is not a new zone. The ORV zone has been around, as Frank said, since the 80s.
We're just tweaking it.
Yeah, so it's still a transitional zone.
But it's a big departure from the vision from before. The vision from before was office research zones are the no smokestack, great rateable with lots of green that everybody wants. And the less building you let people have, the nicer a campus you have. That worked great for a long time. If you'd looked around though, what's happened in Somerset and other nearby counties, it's not working anymore. And so we need these retrofits. Like Larry says, the business community has demonstrated to us that office tenants want these amenities nearby. So the more walkable we make cool stuff in Pluckerman, the more those offices can stay rented or be re-rented or whatever, It's an exciting time to be doing this stuff because
I just want to make sure we're not open up.
Sure. Yeah, no, and look, I come back to what you said when we were looking at the AT&T campus, which is, hey, if you just allow retail, you could end up with a 1 million square foot IKEA. And so when we were doing the adjustments to the zoning, We put in, it's 2 million, we upzoned it to 2 million square feet, and we provided that 300,000 of that could be set aside for
A variety of
conference
lifestyle
center,
uses.
conference center hotels, retail, breweries, restaurants.
So think about it for a minute. If those
Oh,
facilities,
I'm all on board, I'm just.
Yeah, no.
Concerned about we're envisioning, well, we can't decide what happens, but in a way, we can kind
Can we limit the
Guide.
type of retail?
yeah, you can, not only can you limit the type, you could permit retail only if they kiss your butt. I mean, no, I mean, instead of them giving you a strip and saying, this is the retail I'm entitled to, you could have standards that say you're not entitled to any retail unless you do some things that we want. I think we could, without being onerous, we could come up with some ways that it would be an interesting.
The reason I asked that, Frank, I think it's kind of obvious, is that there's some retail space open already in town. And I just get concerned for the business owners, in Pluckman or in Bedminster Village, even though there's not a lot of them, in terms of competition, in terms of we're opening up another zone and they're already not doing that great with the retail aspect. So I think if we limit the type and the amount, I think that's okay.
I think it's not a one or the other, right? Because if we get more people into those office spaces, everybody does better,
Yeah.
right? And if the office spaces stay empty, we're gonna have more vacancy in town in the retail.
And
Right?
retail is going to be harder.
Yeah, and if I've got two choices of places to eat that maybe are similar in their menu, I'm staying in town and eating in one of those places. I'm not going down to Bridgewater or some other place. And I think what's so exciting about what we're doing right now is if you think about how Bedminster was shaped by the interstate highways and automobiles, so that, think of AT&T. I mean, on and off, it's the whole deal, right? We're now moving into a period where sites like AT&T, linked by your bike and hike trail, are going to connect walkable places in your two villages with the opportunities for some really dynamic, livable spaces in between, some in Pluckman, some in Bedminster, and some right on the AT&T site. That is like a universe apart from where we were 20, 30 years ago. And I think it's an exciting place to be right now. I think if we do it right, it's only going to make the town more desirable to live in and to visit. And
Yeah, well, we could always limit it to only. Yeah,
get the word out.
I wish we could get that word out, that we're doing these great things.
yeah. If only there was a way to do that.
If only
And just to follow up on Lou's idea, we can limit the retail to pizzerias and nail salons. Because there appears to be unlimited opportunities for pizzerias and nail salons.
And a nail salon
There are
doesn't
a
even
lot
have
of
to have a name, it just
people
says
in
nail. That's my favorite one.
Larry, the percentage of retail at AT&T property is 15%?
So
Yes.
so that it's 300,000, which could be, so 300,000 out of a total of 2 million, which could be conference center hotel. I think that would probably eat up about 80,000 or 100,000. If the developers want to go that way. A gym.
The
right,
lifestyle gym is
A
going to
lifestyle gym could be
That's another 100
80,
grand.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
So, and then, so it really, so yes, we put 300,000 to these other uses.
But when
It
those,
could all be retail.
when those larger
It could all be
scale-
eaten up by a hotel or gym.
Yeah, and if we need to be a little more directional about which of those things happen, we can still think some more about that. But I think it's going to be, the marketplace that we're in is going to make it so attractive to some of those types of tenancies that, like lifestyle. If you've ever seen the way they operate, it's pretty amazing. And so then the retail or other restaurant type uses that are going to want to be clustered, they're going to want to be in a pretty cool looking place. They're not just going to want to look like they're in an old office building. So there's going to be a complete makeover happening there. And I think, like Larry says, we're making an opportunity for something that will bring more vitality into that setting so that people will want to be in that setting.
Right, and one of the things that, I want to hit upon, and then we'll just hand it over to Frank to walk through his memo, is well, maybe there's two elements. One is all the rezoning that we've been tweaking with has been infill development, right? Looking at existing product, existing properties that are already built. We're not pushing our OR zones. We're not going into the R3. We're not going into the R10. We're not going beyond our village areas. We're not going beyond our centers, really. And I think that's important to look at. How can Bedminster support the existing businesses? How can we continue some viability of the commercial uses without compromising our overall characteristics of the town? And I think the way we do it is we work with what we have. Just as Frank said, if we could go back and redesign the hills, we would do that, right? We would put in sidewalks. We would make it more accessible to the retail, but we can't do that. So we can only play with the areas where development can be adjusted and tweaked. And this is one way of doing it. And the other element that I come back to, and there's been all sorts of legislation that's been proposed by developers in the last year or so, and one of which was saying if you have underperforming corporate offices or just office complexes, developers should be able to go to affordable housing, to inclusionary development, bypassing the municipal zoning.
It's easy to make.
Now that legislation is not going to go anywhere because League of Municipalities is, we'll draw a line in the sand. But at the same point, I think we have to be mindful that when it comes to 2025, we should be in position to bolster our OR zones. And this is one way of doing that. So, Frank, if you want to just walk through the memo at this point.
Really, I'm sorry that you don't have a track change version because the changes are relatively minimal, but essentially the text that you're reading here is the text that's been in the master plan since 2002 with just a couple of exceptions. In the second paragraph, most of what I did was wordsmithing more than anything. Where the changes come in, I think, is toward about the fourth paragraph down, where it says that the board should consider developing architectural guidelines for the ORV, and that because we're thinking that there are going to be setbacks for this, the buildings that might be along the state highway on the advanced property that might be in the neighborhood of 50 feet or a little more than 50 feet, we're going to end up changing the setbacks to create the opportunity for the fairly strong streetscape impression that you will get from having buildings that close to the highway. Now, there's still right of way and all that's after you get out into the grass. There's some additional square frontage depth, but the real point is traffic calming is something where your perception of how wide open the playing field is. Imagine that you're driving, out in the middle of the plains and there's nothing anywhere around and you just go 100 miles an hour. But as you come into town, things get closer together and you slow down. Part of the theory here is as we get to that end of the fast part of Route 206, just before that bottleneck, that the architecture is going to in part tell you you're coming into more of a place and that slowing down is just going to seem kind of more logical. So I'm saying something here in that fourth paragraph at the end about traffic calming will invite greater pedestrian activity and the setback requirements should be designed to improve safety and enhance the streetscape. That all means what I just told you a minute ago about what we would do with the zoning standards in order to accomplish that. Tom has the version that I shared with him that has the track changes. Thank you, Tom. Why don't you walk the board through?
Well, if you want, you could email it. Oh, can you?
Can you, probably has it too.
Can you do a screen share?
If it was a draft version.
I thought I searched for that in my phone and didn't find it, but can you send it to her?
I'm
Yeah, I can send it.
on as me
You know, if it's
to the
going to be,
meeting.
Would be helpful if that was on the
Okay.
board.
I'll try to email it.
right, and this just shows, the track changes shows that there's really not much that Frank is adjusting to the ORV. It's still keeping it as a transitional zone. And
Yeah,
he's
the
just making
intention is
some
not really
adjustments.
changing. What's changing is the unidimensional scaling of what we were trying to accomplish there. It was never supposed to have retail. Now it is supposed to have some of that in order to enhance the opportunity for what the zone was intended for.
Are we gonna need any of these properties for our third round for the Calista? Are we like,
Better
With
not
the
say,
KRE
don't say housing.
to help us with, what we needed for the current round? Are we gonna need any areas to help us with the next round for some residential?
That's a conversation that will take us a lot more time than we had tonight, but in the very short version of it, the mayor, Colin and I have been working on what it is that's going to happen next.
Okay,
It's probably going to be a lot like what we had to do this time, so it may be a dozen to a couple of
I
dozen,
didn't know if these properties would,
and we might be able to find ways to do that with a development that only involves the units that we need to create or replace.
Yeah, and these would not be my choices for resi, for multifamily. So once again, I come back to infill and looking at underperforming assets in Bedminster, in the village areas that are already resi, and then not pushing resi out into
Not from doing the Microsoft.
these transitional
But I'll
zones
try to
as
do
you
it from my
go.
phone.
If you're down at, if you go any further west than KRE, you're quickly in, I believe that's a what, R3 and then an R10? R10.
Straight to our tenant.
And for the 206 property, I mean, you're right across the street from R1, actually not R1, you're from that wacky zone that
Oh,
you're in.
SFC.
And then you're in,
I think it's our,
you're in R3, R1?
I think it's on our, I think it's our one.
Yeah, R1.
okay,
I
so we're
would not,
gonna need
I would
this
not be
area. Okay.
looking to put
All right,
high-density resi at either of these properties.
Well, also as a visitor, let's not worry too much about that because we are in compliance with our definite compliance and our round three numbers and they're very modest and our credits are better than anybody in our state. So
All right.
let's focus on it now, here now. Let's not have that discussion about that. We don't need plan ahead. So, one of the things I was trying to put on the record is that George, what he was, is excuse me, because he did. I thought there was an email, he does own property with the current, so we can use on this matter. Otherwise, we can't. We used our property with him, he told us 6 months ago, no longer retired, he told me and us that he's retired. So he does not have a conflict of interest any longer.
You're not old enough to retire.
I looked today.
What the heck?
Like we.
Okay.
But, so that's on the record, and, he's trying to put the weight.
I am.
Do you think it's going to work, or should I just read it off the Tom's phone?
It's really not as, Frank is
I
right.
could have gotten us through this by now if I just brought the other copy.
I'm admitting myself. Let's see what happens next. Now I got to try to pull up the document.
Look at that.
Then you have to allow yourself
To allow
to share
myself-
screen.
I have to find the document.
I have a question, Larry. So, looking at a prospective user for one site, would that user, if everything worked out, what happens to the tenants that are on that property already?
It's not, it would be new space.
They would continue.
It would be in addition.
It's in addition,
In addition.
yeah. And that's a function of the FAR. So the FAR is so low And this was a conversation I think that I started with Paul probably about 6 months ago, looking at the FAR at the advanced property, and is there anything they can do there? He said, no, they're at or over the limit. So, you know, how does our limit compare to what you think is appropriate? And he said, for that site and for the ORV, 0.25 FAR. And I think right now it's at 0.1.
Yeah, it's almost double.
13.5%.
13.5%. It's just crazy. And that was a function of,
Indicative of big setbacks, big lawn, what you
Exactly.
wanted in the 90s in terms of office campus.
Yeah.
Fortresses with boats.
yeah, so no tenants would be displaced, this would be added.
So they're looking for going from 13.5% up to 25%.
Correct.
That's, right now, that's.
Is that a number they asked for, or that's a number
That's the number that Paul came
that
up
Paul
with.
came up with?
And that's, what that's referring to is floor ratio, which is not really percentage of the ratio, but basically it's total of wall floor, whether it's zone, whether it's usage of that. Total floor area of the building, total floor area of the block. So, it's a way to have mass construction. It's not the only way to do it, but the way to do it.
There's more parking lot on this property than there is.
That would be the same. I still want to put it, maybe some there, but, you know, if you listen to what Frank said about through, the zone, what you have is in your master plan, this is like 8.5. About the future land use districts of office research village, which is a different district than PUC, right? But it has some similarities. There's 2 locations short, one is the property, the other, crossroads area. That's it. So we focus on 2 future land use areas.
So that's not the track change one. It accepted the changes. That's why I couldn't read it in my phone.
So I did all that, and that's not what we needed to say.
Well, you know what? Now I'm going to use Tom's phone like you suggested.
I mean, I have.
No, what he just sent it to me, he said was not,
No, I did send you the.
You did?
Click on
I only emailed
view.
the red line one, but you know how this.
Right, show changes.
Yeah, you're seeing the
You might
exact,
have to show change, you have to open it in Word.
yeah, which I,
which you can't do on your phone.
yeah,
If you send it to me here,
I can do that,
You know,
I
I
can do
have
that,
it.
Colin.
oh, you have it?
I have it. You want, so, let me send, you know what, actually, I'm sorry to,
I don't know, Colin.
What?
it's, Wednesday, May 24th. At 2:10. From Frank.
There might have been some final edits on this, but I just checked things. I think we changed it graphically.
Sorry, guys.
Unless you want me to just.
Just in case.
Do you want me to send to Colin what I just got from Tom? That I can do.
That would be good, I think.
Well-
Don't convert it.
Frank, did you make any changes from your, from last week at Wednesday? From Wednesday?
No.
No, okay, so I have that version of it.
So imagine you have this master plan document, you're gonna put
It's-
number
I don't know
of
if it helps.
areas. One of them is ORP. And this text is from that document. If you were to say have a public hearing to amend, but effectively,
Yeah, sure.
and you're not even changing, this thing, you're not even changing the mapping.
If we're ready to share, I just have to, I mean,
Or the master plan. Whereas we can change the mapping. We have to pay our need, that's what we want. Remember to change it. I think that you change the name.
ORDL, Office Research Development Laboratory. KRE went to Office Research Village Mixed Use, ORVMU, which were, renaming and branding those zones. Here, we're not. We're keeping the ORV, once again, keeping it the transitional, but adding elements that would truly make these properties transition.
If Colin's on the job, I think we're almost there.
I'm working on it. I just haven't walked into the meeting.
He's got to go through all Seinfeld memes.
Log into the meeting.
It'll save us time, trust me.
Janine, you don't have a link. It's gonna be-
sure.
It's trying to take me into my account.
While we're waiting,
While we're waiting,
I'm not disagreeing with Tom because we have done what we had to do with our affordable housing plan, and we are in that kind of shape compared to everybody else in the state. All that's true.
I just want to.
What Dave and I.
Let's not do any discussion of affordable housing.
Oh, fair enough.
I just sent it.
Okay, can I just finish
to
it?
you about that, and you're right to have.
Here it is. Sorry about that.
I'm not worried about anything, that's why I want to do it. Because
That's why he's the lawyer.
That's why he's the lawyer.
everything I said before, I was saying.
And anything I tried to say, he just stopped.
No.
We're good.
Justin.
That's why you're sitting next to him.
Completely.
All right.
Colin is connecting.
We're getting there.
Now, if he pulls this up and it's only like one line change, I'm telling you.
That's what I'm thinking.
Whoa.
Oh, all right.
That's our tech guy, right?
Okay.
Is that flip?
You wanted to zoom in? Okay, zoom in.
There you go, that's awesome. All right, so in the first paragraph, like I said, basically wordsmithing. It's not changing the meaning. I'm at this part of my old age where any words I can get rid of that don't help the conversation, I try to get rid of. So the words Bedminster, Pluckham, and Villages, well, the word village is going to show up all over the place, so I don't need to say it there because we know what we're talking about. When we talk about once primarily residential, that's important because these are both villages that were almost entirely residential with a few businesses and ended up becoming entirely business with a few residences. So that transformation is something that we're commenting on, and we're talking about the fact that the historic district controls have been involved in those conversions that have taken place. In the next paragraph, the language I deleted, while major regional office facilities have been constructed to heights of 3 stories in some locations, such facilities would be clearly inconsistent. Well, we're permitting things up to 3 stories. It's 2 and 3 stories that we're going to allow that couldn't remain in that configuration. Now it says it's intended to provide for a combination of office research and retail development. Where before it said significant development because it was just office research. That was what was intended. At a scale that relates favorably, which turns into that, I think is the proper way to say that, while also expanding Bedminster's office research potential in the growing. So what we're trying to do here is tie what we're trying to accomplish by the growing into that cluster of uses, life science, biotech uses in central New Jersey. We want it not to just happen at AT&T. If it can be part of these sites, we want to say right here that we're thinking that it could be part of these sites. I didn't go as far as to say aseptic manufacturing, which we said explicitly. But I didn't want to have to
That's
explain
not
it.
prohibited either.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Okay.
Drive-throughs.
Oh,
Rich just texted me, he said, please just.
So if you look at the next paragraph down, the lowest one on the page here, it says, calls for a regulatory approach that requires significant portions of the parcel adjoining the village to remain largely undeveloped and green. Well, that was a theory at one point. That's not the way things ended up happening. If you look at both of those sites, advanced, the part right next to the village ended up with buildings and parking lots, not green. So what we're really talking about is a regulatory approach that requires buildings that be designed at a scale that will be compatible with the village and respect elements of village form, style, and character. Here on the next paragraph, what we're doing is talk about why this mix of uses fortifies the long-term viability of the office research uses with the addition of conveniently located retail and restaurant uses. Yeah, what we just finished talking about, these are the words that are in the master plan to accomplish that. The next paragraph, limits on development intensity, that should have been in there in the first place, including bulk standards, should be scaled to respect the long-term objectives while also making the zoning for these areas competitive with other opportunities in the region. There was a time where Bedminster was competitive because it was Bedminster. If you wanted to be in a place like this, you came to Bedminster. Now we've got other places that are really desirable as well in the same general milieu that we're in, where their FAR and their facility, the opportunities they create, make more sense for me to go spend my money there than here. And without giving away the farm, what we want to do is tune things up so that we stay effectively competitive in that same marketplace. That's what all those words right there is supposed to be. Again, respecting the scale and character of the village. I think there's a little more on the next page, or am I wrong? Nope. Okay. So the overall intent is really not changing, but a major aspect of what we permit is changing a lot. Anybody who thinks, oh my God, who needs more retail on the state highway, could look at this and say, what are we doing? We're going to notice it as a master plan amendment. We're going to have a zoning change that will also be on notice, which is the kind of notice you have to send to everybody within 200 feet of the area that's changing. So everybody around there is going to know what we're doing, and I'm going to have to explain it to them in terms that, which I believe, I'm not making this stuff up, I believe that the transition that your master plan is going through now is your vision, not mine, but it's a vision that has remained extremely consistent over time and really hasn't wavered, but it's adjusted to reflect changing realities that make things better for the town by being a little different than you used to be. Not very different, not throw out the baby with the bathwater, but refinements all along the way. That's what this will be.
That's it?
I think that's it. See you next week. Thank you, everybody involved in doing that. That was so really helpful.
So, when you get to deliver on this, if you want to, the steps are, so, really, that's another step. If you were to recommend this, that you do, the notice for the master plan part of the year. You can't do it next. Yeah, notice. Publication takes time. So when you do the possibility of
June 29th, I believe.
talk about that, we could have a special, I think that's available.
Tom can handle it. He's a planner too, by the way.
Not doing that. So, if you were to say, let's schedule this, do that tonight, say, next week. take schedule it. Next week's meeting, we say schedule it then. When you do that, if you schedule it, it's notice, not just a newspaper notice and, that's the master plan. And if you were to hold a public hearing and adopt that master plan, basically set your plan, then that becomes your document. And it goes master plan. It goes right into the master plan. Then the governing body has the ability to use an ordinance. They use an ordinance, they're supposed to do is consistent with the master plan. Check that, they do that in contract, where they say, ordinance, not the master plan, ordinance, it's their law, you get it, you look at it, if it's, you find it's consistent with the master plan, then just amend it, and something like that happens, it makes my job a lot easier, and your defense a lot easier, then that is, that's what we vote for. Occurs after the first reading, for the second. It's going by that. You say it's consistent, but it's not consistent. That's going by it. Go ahead, start without that, with that, and then proceed to the second reading, but a hearing, that is notice of that and they have their, they adopt it. That's law. Zoning ordinance that is available to property owners. So, like I said, theoretically, here, that's a possible.
And the only reason we would even talk about a special meeting is because there's somebody we'd like to take to the dance, and time really matters to them. Right, that's fair
Yeah.
to say?
Yeah, I think, from my perspective, this is a master plan amendment that I would recommend regardless of whether there was someone knocking on the door wanting to come in. But because there is this company that's knocking on the door, wants to come in, be a very good addition to Bedminster, that's the reason why I'm trying to get this.
And without giving away,
Special meeting for.
without giving away anything I can't give away, and the mayor wants me to be careful about this, part of the reason they're coming to Bedminster is because they perceive their ideology, which is built around sustainable everything, to fit right in with your ideology about how things are supposed to work here. I thought that was pretty cool.
They must
Said
have gone
that's
to the
what we come
farmer's
here
market
for.
then. That's where they got it.
2,800 next week.
Okay, I
We
didn't
had
say,
that discussion.
I didn't say too much, right?
No.
And also you have to put in mind, so if you working with the town on modernization of this research and development, how to plan. With a lot of information from experts beyond us. Sensitivity to how that's information you can gather that's used. It's really comprehensive, especially compared to what this sure you it's easy ability to grasp the problem. Really hard. So if you want to, this is another step. It's an increment, but as I always say,
Increments are better than excrements.
Oh, Tom, did you and Frank, did you guys coordinate that?
it's almost as good as the It's a good thing.
Why don't we open it to the board?
Okay.
Been a long week.
Have to say, any board members have
Friday,
any comments or questions?
I have to say, it just sounds like something that we really need to grab hold of, because it just sounds like it's something that these two areas are in trouble. And, you know, we need to do something to make these two areas much more sustainable for the town. And of course I have questions, you know, I mean, and, you know, yeah, obviously, I mean, we're talking about big generalities and general things, and I think that, you know, they're wonderful. Yeah, but I then get down to what kind of retail, how much
Well, we'll get
retail.
into
Yeah.
that with the ordinance.
And
Okay.
yes.
When you get down to the ordinance stage,
That's when
okay.
we'll get into the, and we'll have
And-
lots of questions, I'm
But-
sure.
And that
Everything I've
ordinance will
heard
be
tonight
sent
has
to
been
you
fabulous.
for your recommendation. So when
Oh,
you
yeah.
get it, you don't just rubber stamp it. I mean,
Yeah.
you get to say,
I
yeah,
didn't
it's
know when that
consistent.
discussion came up, that was all.
Yeah, that'll be next, and
Okay.
we'll get into that. I mean, I'm very much in favor of this, I think, like you said, we need it, but it supports our office,
It
and
does.
and we really need to do that, because we know what office space is these days, so we really.
Benefit everybody, including all residential property here in town, including the hills.
Yeah, I mean, I think it creates the opportunity for the owners of these particular properties to change with the marketplace. Because clearly what they're doing now is
Not working.
Right.
not working. And it's not just them, because New Jersey has a glut of empty
Exactly.
offices.
Right. I think
Well,
every-
we overbuilt
Yeah.
office, but
Right.
face it everywhere, because it was a good rainfall.
The dynamic has changed.
And it provided, you know, what we needed at the time, but it's changed.
Yeah, and I want to just come back to something that Kathy had mentioned, that, you know, you're looking at big parking, fields of parking.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and frankly, under today's models, you don't need all that parking.
Well, that's what I was thinking
Yeah,
about saying,
so-
is that there's so much
I
parking
mean-
that it's empty.
Tom made the comment that this may result in more parking. I actually think that you can probably accommodate the new space that's being discussed, some of the retail, and you may not end up with much more parking than what you currently have now.
The worst part of what we're faced with now is that we're going to put a footprint on the ground that relates to what we think about parking now, and 20 years from now, that's not what parking is going to be. And we can't tell you even what it's going to be, because maybe that autonomous vehicle doesn't need to sit in that space all day, just like the one you drive in yourself, but maybe you got dropped off by something. Maybe everybody's Ubering because it just became ridiculously cheap compared to paying for, well, you know, I don't know. Who knows? We don't know. That's what we don't know. You got to worry about.
You can also do this shared parking, especially in retail. I don't say actually there'll be more parking, we're saying absolutely not. We're not gonna know that right now, that's something. That's something.
But the worst part is that landlords are looking for increases in the amount of parking on sites that are already developed, just to make sure that they can get tenants that want to make sure they've got this other parking, even though nobody comes to work. I mean, I don't understand that.
So, if you think about it, go for the public, I have no problem. Let's say,
No, I don't think we had any big,
about this.
yeah, I think we're done with this. As long as everybody likes what they saw, we'll have a public hearing and notice for it. It'll be 20-minute
It's
hearing.
okay with that.
Yeah, okay, we need a motion for that?
I think that'd be good. Right, it's a motion to authorize.
Let's have a motion.
Notice for a public hearing.
I'll make the motion to have a special meeting for the master plan amendment for June 29th.
Second.
Oh, before you finish, I don't think anybody's on, but they're on Zoom, the room here, but we should say that we open to the public.
We do have one person on. If you choose to say anything, you can unmute, you can raise your hand, you can,
Oh, right.
or you can not do
Or not.
anything.
You have the option of not saying anything.
You can just listen. I believe that we're okay.
Yeah, so we did open it to the public.
Okay.
Yeah, then the motion could be, roll call.
Okay, we're closing to the public.
Mayor Jacobs?
Aye.
Committeeman Hickey?
Aye.
Ms. Urbana?
Aye.
Mr. Leonard?
Aye.
Mr. DiGiovanni? Mr. Walter?
Aye.
Ms. Christie? Aye. Chairwoman Gotcha.
Everybody should say goodnight to Peter. Good night, Peter. TJC.
Good night. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we're good for the 29th.
Was the other.
29th. 29th.
So, I didn't need a closed session, because I don't really have any news to you. It's 15, 25 seconds. Communication, so I don't need one. Wanted a closed session on that, or on the other attorney contract, which we talked about earlier tonight.
Motion to adjourn.
And we don't have,
Wait, can we do that
Paul to go
already?
through,
No.
No,
so we're not touching that.
Yes, he can be here next week, and he will have a updated chart, he said, which he will probably send to me at the beginning of next week. So if we are meeting on June 8th, which I assume we are, we can discuss that then.
Do you have any applications?
Unfortunately, no. The last application that came in, Paul just recently gave me a letter, and that was deemed incomplete. So they're gonna have to start from scratch. And the only other one that we have on that's even remotely soon is July 13th.
Well, do we want to just, if there's any other business to do it on the 29th? Because this will be a public hearing that lasts a half an hour at the most,
We
probably.
most certainly can. That is up to the.
Rather than have 3 meetings. It's up to you all.
I'm double booked next week, not that that makes a difference, but.
There you
That's
go.
reason.
So then Paul will be here on the 29th to discuss that other stuff that we're talking about.
Correct.
Very good.
So you're all in favor, we'll skip June 8th and we'll just do
See
June.
next week. All right, we'll go to the 29th. Now we can have a.
Neither of these five.
That's fine, I'm ready.
So I just want to, Carl, I just want to hit on a couple issues. So this afternoon, I got an email from the owner of the, do we call it the AT&T space now, or do we still call it the former Mallinckrodt space? I don't know what we call it yet. So, no, the Mallinckrodt.
Oh, the new site.
The AT&T
Talked
site.
about it, yes, with Larry's big picture.
So,
Congratulations.
yeah, well, it's the AT&T deal, moving them into the former Mallinckrodt space, is a finalist for the Commercial Real Estate Impact Award for from the United Way. And I believe, I didn't know the United Way had a Commercial Real Estate Impact Award, but apparently they do, and it seems to be a pretty big deal. Scott Katz from Lionstone asked me if I was going to the United Way event, and I was like, was this email meant for someone else? Because
Who gets the award?
No,
Who
what
gets
are
the
you
award?
talking about?
well, it's funny because
donation to go.
Scott got an email asking him to attend and accept the award if they win.
Who?
Scott Katz from Lionstone, which owns the former Mallinckrodt site. And so he asked me if I was going to attend. I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So anyway, I just thought that was neat that AT&T was identified as a finalist for that deal. Having sort of been a little bit with AT&T and a little bit with Lionstone and with some of the brokers as they were trying to put that all together. So, it's nice to see that.
It also happened because Larry was adamant that that was not going to become a residential site. That we were going to maintain that anchor of our north end of 206 is going to be business.
Yeah.
Serious business. It worked. Thank you. Even though I recommended that we seriously take a look at that assisted living guy, Larry said, sit down and shut up. So I did. Well done, Mayor. It worked.
And then, while we're on the discussion of headquarters or companies looking to locate or relocate a headquarters space to Bedminster, I was on the phone with Noah from KRE, and they have a national tenant who will be making, they just signed a lease. I don't want to jump them on the announcement, but I'll just tell you that it's another company that we will be proud to have as a resident corporation located here in Bedminster, 20,000 square feet over at Bedwan. So that's.
So we should start marketing ourselves as the headquarters location.
Hey, let's do it.
That's what I think.
Colin, put that on our Instagram.
You only need a couple.
Historic headquarters.
Right.
Yeah, very nice.
I think they're gonna break ground on the project over there.
Well, Tom is working on the developers agreement. He has to take he's got to take comments from the township committee side and integrate them with some comments he received from KRE. That's got to move forward. KRE received their treatment works approval from DEP, which was the last major hurdle. They signed their DOT agreement. And if they didn't sign it last week, they're supposed to sign it this week. So that means that the road improvement project at Burnt Mills, Washington Valley Road, 202-206, can proceed once it works through its own timing elements. And I called Walt Lane down at the county to see where their planning board application was sitting and sort of pushed the county to get a very minor comment letter back to KRE. And so that should be resolved probably in June. And KRE was also working out some issues with the bank. And so right now their working model is bank will stay in its current configuration as long as they can keep it there.
Circumvent.
And then that'll be, sort of as the project comes closer to that site, then they'll put them in a trailer or come up with some temporary.
An ATM or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, I've seen trailers, which is funny to think of a bank inside a trailer, but I've seen it.
You can steal the whole bank.
Yeah, you did, right, just, pull up a trailer, take it off.
We put banks in trailers.
Just bring an electric can opener.
Interesting.
Yeah, right.
But I would like to see the traffic improvements at Washington Valley, Burnt Mills, 202, 206. I'd like to see that go August. I'd like to see that start.
That would be great. Yeah,
Wow.
that would be great.
I'd like to see it.
That light is terrible.
We'll see if they can get it done. Exactly.
They've been working on that for a while. It looks like we're almost done.
The inside finished stuff takes a long time.
So is it, you mentioned Primrose, so I also inquired about Primrose. So what my understanding of Primrose is that they were ready to go, and then there was a change in approach from Primrose Corporate, where they wanted, instead of one big open space, they wanted to have smaller rooms. Smaller rooms meant having bathrooms and sinks on one side and then bathrooms and sink on the other side. So instead of one big room, now you're breaking it up with each smaller room having those facilities, which meant changing the plumbing.
Everything, HVAC, the whole.
So if
building.
you may have seen that they were digging out where the sewer lines were connecting, and then they dug it out again. I think they may have done it 3 times. So that they kept changing.
Nice big check.
Yeah.
That poor franchisee.
But I believe that should all be done, and they should be moving forward. I think the building looks great.
Yeah,
It's a nice addition. Also, it really showcases the Pluckman Presbyterian Church from that side of the
See it from
street.
behind, yeah.
So it really looms over that area, which is.
That's a really
it's
nice
kinda-
characterization, because when we stood in the parking lot that day, I was like, oh my God, there's a church there.
Right.
It's always hidden by all the trees.
And you
Never
couldn't-
really
and you
noticed it
couldn't
quite
see
like
And
that.
now you're like, it really, to some extent, a term that we've been using is branding. It really brands the church as the center of Pluckerman from not just
From different
202,
angles.
206,
Yeah.
but now from Burnt Mills. I thought that was really neat.
It is, it's very
We're
cool.
gonna be able to see it from the new residences.
Yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So that's the updates I got.
Okay. Okay.
I have nothing else.
You have some.
No.
Oh, I
Guys?
I can make that motion again if you need me to.
can't make them.
You're not a moving party. Some people are.
Actually, it's
Oh, but this party is moving, I
Pack
think.
it up.
to everybody
Okay,
in the
do we have
town.
a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Second,
Oh,
stand in for Rich.
Should.
see, you got your motion.
Frank would have beat you to it.
I know.